Welcome to the RideShare Guy podcast, where you will learn about the rideshare and mobility industry straight from Harry Campbell, who's got over 5 years experience covering the industry and has talked to thousands of drivers. There's no better place to stay up to date, entertained, and educated. So let's dive in.
All right, so Luis Gustavo is the co-founder at StopClub, which is a vertical social network designed for gig workers. StopClub's purpose is to connect the gig community to work better and safer together. They've got about 100,000 users in Brazil and looking to make some traction in the US. So Luis recently reached out to me, and this was a really interesting concept, something we've sort of seen in the gig economy before here in the United States, but hasn't really worked. And so I was curious to get him on the podcast to see what is it that he's doing that's so special in Brazil? How does the market differ? And, learn from him, and hopefully he can learn a thing or two from me. So Luis, how are you doing today?
I'm fine. Thank you. Thanks for the invitation. I'm glad to be here and chat with you.
Yeah. Coming all the way from Brazil, right? What city are you in Brazil?
Rio. We're from Rio, born and raised here, and our business headquarters is in Rio as well.
Okay, cool. How many people do you have on the team?
15 people. We're a small team.
15. Okay. I mean, It's pretty big for, so how's the pitch sound and how I gave the app? How would you describe StopClub?
You did it perfectly. That's not how we started, actually. We started in 2017 with a different approach, same angle. We always try to connect the gig community, but especially Uber drivers and other ride-sharing guys. But mainly at the start, we were like this one-stop shop for drivers. So we rented underused parking spaces. We built this whole infrastructure for them to wash their cars, eat, but mainly to get together.
Got it. What were some of the early challenges that you were trying to solve for with the app?
Well, when we started, Pedro, my co-founder and my longtime friend, he approached me and said, "Man, have you ever thought about how hard it is the life of an Uber driver?" And I was like, "Tell me more. What's your angle? What you're thinking?" And said, "Man, they're different from cab drivers because it's very easy to join the app. So you sign up, and in a few hours you're ready to go. But they don't have the community. They don't have anything. Taxi drivers, they do have a community." I said, "All right. So what do you suggest?" And he said, "Man, we should talk to these guys." Yeah. So we created a survey. And we catched like 100 plus rides talking to drivers and asking them questions. A lot of things that we already imagined were serious problems for them. Like, they have a hard time to find a safe space to park their car and not to pay like parking lot, But like they have a hard time to find clean bathrooms. Okay. But we didn't know that they feel so lonely. And that they feel unsafe in their work environment. Essentially, what they said to us is that we have no work environment. I used to work at a company. I used to have this time to get a coffee with my friends, talk about the Sunday matches and everything. But now I just spend 12 and 14 hours a day inside my car. Yeah.
Kind of depressing, huh?
Yeah, and I said, but it doesn't have to be like that.
Yeah.
They can hang out. They can find their friends. They can rely on the community to solve their problems. So that's when we started StopClub in 2017 with this idea to bring these communities together. We did it physically back then. Now we're doing digitally.
Got it. Well, and I mean, I think one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on was to really understand, some of the challenges that gig workers are facing in Brazil. And it's sort of funny that literally everything you've listed so far are the exact same problems and probably in the same sort of order of importance that drivers here in the United States face, even though it's literally a continent away, right? And probably, a very different, in a lot of other respects. So I think it's interesting that a lot of the same issues that these drivers in Brazil are having, before we talk about the actual product StopClub, are there any other, tell me a little bit, what's it like actually driving for Uber in Brazil? Are there big competitors? Are there any main differences that you know of off the top of your head, how it might compare to driving for Uber here in the United States?
Well, first of all, let me talk about the similarity. We have, according to some research, the same amount of people that work in those platforms. We have 22 million gig workers in Brazil, and in the US, you have 22 million of gig workers. Apparently,
so Brazil's a pretty big place.
Yeah, But 14% of our adult population works in some platform. In the US, this percentage is close to 9%.
Yeah. So same ballpark though.
Yeah. But I think that there are other companies here in Brazil, but they're not big competitors. The biggest one is 99, which was bought by Didi a few years ago. But I guess that Uber holds more than 70% of the market. So
I mean, again, probably pretty similar to the US. I mean, we've got Lyft here in the United States, but definitely during the past 2 years, I feel like Uber has emerged as sort of the biggest and best option. Sounds similar in US. I know one thing that here in the US, most drivers actually own their own vehicle, and they will, for example, go and sign up to drive for Uber from their couch. I believe in other countries like Brazil, maybe, a lot of folks actually rent it through a fleet owner. Is that right?
Yeah, there are a good percentage of drivers that rent their cars here. Yes.
And how does that model
share
work?
The old stuff because it's very expensive. We have, like, Brazil is a place where you have a lot of creative solutions. So, for instance, in my city here, Rio de Janeiro, we have cars that run on gas, not gasoline. Like domestic gas,
like natural gas.
Natural gas. Exactly.
Oh, interesting.
They do an adaptation, and they save a lot of money on fuel on that.
Interesting. Very cool. Any other major differences between the U.S. and Brazil market?
From what I've talked to other drivers in the U.S., they tend to feel much safer in the U.S. Instead of regarding violence, not regarding like I said that regarding extreme violence, like to getting robbed or that sort of thing. It happens a lot here in Brazil. They do feel very unsafe.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting because, actually I will say probably over, it's always been, safety has always been an issue. And if you look at, for example, in the US, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, right, of the top 10 most dangerous jobs in the United States, taxi cab is up there, in the top 10. Now, Uber and Lyft, have removed, they've improved some of the safety aspects, right? Because there's less cash involved and, it's a digital transaction. But ultimately, if you're transporting people for hire late at night, intoxication, there's a lot that can sort of go wrong. And there's no getting around it, right? It can be a bit of a dangerous job, but that is one thing that I've heard in a lot of the emerging markets like Brazil, or especially in Mexico, that frankly, like we think it's, I bet if you asked a lot of drivers here in the US, right, they would tell you about a lot of the safety concerns, but I feel like in Brazil, like there are some real safety concerns and, I'm laughing about it, but I imagine that there's actually, it's probably not a laughing matter. It's probably pretty serious.
Oh yeah, for sure. We as you said here, they have the option to pay in cash. So
interesting. Like on an Uber trip, you can pay in cash. You can pay in cash.
So what bad guys do? They select they create a fake profile, and they say that they will pay the ride in cash. So there's no real connection for the person who is about to get in the car and the person who created the profile. And then when he enters the car, he announces that the driver is going to be robbed. That's a big concern here.
Yeah, that sort of seems like a recipe for disaster. I know that Uber and maybe even a couple other apps have, talked about or even piloted cash rides in the past, and the, response from drivers was sort of, outrage, like, oh my God, this is, this sounds like the dumbest idea I've ever heard. This seems extremely unsafe, not something that I'd want to do, but it sounds like, that's an option in Brazil.
Yeah, and we have the knowledge about what happened to taxi drivers before. This is exactly why these guys were getting robbed all the time. And here in Brazil.
Yeah. Okay. So, Luis, let's pivot a little. Talk about something a little more less serious and more fun. StopClub. Okay. So, imagine you just hailed an Uber here in Brazil. You hailed an Uber. I'm your driver, and let's pretend that for some reason I don't speak Portuguese. I only speak English. And you're in my car. I'm an Uber driver, and you're the founder of StopClub, co-founder of StopClub. Why should I care about this app, and why should I sign up? Pitch me. Cool. I'm a driver.
Thanks for the question. Usually I say to the driver, like, how do you do to record your rides? And usually they say, I don't. So, man, you really should record everything that happens inside the car.
Record audio, video, or what?
Audio and video. You should do it, because that's how you have evidence of what happens inside the car. Let me tell you a story about something that happened this week here in Brazil, here in Rio, actually. A guy got an Uber, and later on he called the driver and said, man, I forgot my phone inside your car. The driver looked back and see no phone. Well, okay, I'll search for it. And said, no, I'm positive that I left it in your car. So after searching it for a long time, said, it's not here at all. And the guy was pissed. So he checked on his camera log, because he used our software, and he saw that a woman entered next after the guy. A woman entered the car with a kid, and she took it. And then she called this lady and said, I'm sorry, I think you got something that was in my car. Is this phone? I said, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. No, I'm positive that you got it, because it's on tape. And she said, what? Oh, sorry, my kid must have gotten it for mistake. I said, no. Okay, so could you please return the phone? Yeah. So this kind of situation happens a lot of time. But this is one feature that our app has.
Got it. So your app can turn a driver's phone into a dash cam that records audio and video, one-way or two-way video?
One-way video at this point.
So facing inside.
Facing inside. We're just releasing this new update that they're going to change the cameras. And also to share. And
so they would obviously, literally have to have it kind of mounted somewhere in the middle on the dashboard so that it's somewhat looking back.
Yeah, just like your background.
Yeah, actually, for those who are watching on YouTube, right? I've got a nice virtual background. I'm not actually in the car, believe it or not, and facing the wrong way. Okay, that's cool. I've heard of this. I've heard of some companies doing this in the US, but I mean, I'm curious if this is one of those creative solutions you mentioned, where frankly, maybe drivers are not earning as much in Brazil. But, here in the US, right, like we recommend that drivers probably, after a phone mount, that, something that's literally holding your phone up, like the number 2 most valuable thing that you can get that not a lot of drivers in the US do, to be honest, maybe 5 to 10% is a dash cam, right? For accidents, for liability, for safety reasons. But I haven't seen any apps that have really taken off. I know there are apps that turn your phone into a dash cam. I haven't seen any that take off, but it sounds like that's one of the features that you do offer that's popular.
Yeah, here in the US, this sort of cameras, they're way more cheap than here in Brazil. They are super expensive here. So this is the solution.
It's funny though, because like in the US, like you can get a good dash cam for probably $50 to $75 US, maybe a little bit more if you want a really good one, but even it might record two-way, have infrared, have a wide angle. I mean, it'll be probably, a pretty solid camera, and still most drivers don't do it. Most drivers don't have one unless it's required. I don't know. There's something about the US where it just hasn't really caught on, but that's interesting. So tell me, what other features, what are some of the most popular features on StopClub? Why are people, sort of hearing about it? It's like, oh, I got to have this app because of that feature.
Remember that I said to you, there's a social network. So you create friends in the app, so people that you can rely on when you're working, and you can see them in the map in real time. You can see where every one of your friends is. So you can eventually call someone, and we have this sort of walkie-talkie feature. So you can bring up your friend's profile and then walkie-talkie him in case if you have a problem, or just if you want to have lunch together. We can just call you, like send a message and say, man, I'm really close by to you. Let's have a lunch together. Let's have a cup of coffee. Oh, I'm having a very shitty day, or I'm having a good day. I want to celebrate with you. And why should you don't have a work environment? This is the whole idea of StopClub. Recreate the work environment for the gig worker. And even if you have to do this digitally, we can. Like, you can literally see where your friends are all the time and communicate with them.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that angle a lot too. I never really thought about the aspect. I mean, there's, of course, this reminds me, I know we did an article back in the past about, ways to chat with other drivers. And there was an app called Voxer, Voxer, that may actually still be around. And, drivers would set up these little Voxer walkie-talkie groups and, sort of like, a stunted audio, right? So you could send a message and check it later. And it was pretty cool. It was pretty popular, but obviously that was sort of, an app for the general masses and not specifically for rideshare drivers. Just little groups would be created. I'm on your website and I see thankfully Google is translating the Portuguese for me, but it says add drivers in your region and share the real-time location, which is pretty cool, like you said, right? If you've got friends and you can actually see where they are, right? Like if you want to take a little break, grab a coffee, grab lunch, that's pretty neat. I haven't thought of that. And then chat with drivers, using the walkie-talkie feature, chat and learn from experts, and then also recording the video. I see that. So sounds like you've got some pretty cool features that are solving and addressing a lot of these pain points that drivers in both Brazil and the US have. But I am curious, I mean, it sounds like this is working pretty well in Brazil. You've got 15 people on the team, you've got 100,000 users, right? Why do you think it's working so well in the US and has never really caught on? Or sorry, why do you think it's working so well in Brazil, but nothing like this has caught on in the US so far?
Oh, I have no idea, but let me let me just ask you a question. You worked once at a big company, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I used to work at Boeing as an aerospace engineer. So
yeah, I did my homework. So imagine that you're leaving office and you're going to your car at the parking lot, and you see a fellow coworker. You never see him before. Yeah. Actually, you cross with him sometimes, but you're not friends actually. But you see him, and he's like changing his tire. Has a flat tire. He's changing a tire, and he's having a hard time. Yeah. What are the chances of you stopping by and say, "Man, do you want some help?"
Yeah. If I have some connection to him, I'm sure that I would stop, right? If it's some random person, I'm probably less likely to stop.
Friends from friends, Yeah. Friend of a friend, something like that. But why should it be different with gig workers? Mm-hmm. You technically work for the same company, but you treat each other like total strangers. Yeah. It shouldn't be like that.
I think it is interesting that like you may not even know people, right? It's not like you wear a uniform, right? Obviously, if someone is in the Boeing campus of where I'm working, it's like, okay, that guy's, I've seen him around before. Yeah. He's obviously my coworker, right? But there is something with Uber drivers. They might have a little sticker, but you don't know what they're wearing or who they are, right? You might be standing in line at McDonald's behind another Uber driver and not even know it, right?
Exactly. And that's what's funny about what's happening here. Mm-hmm. When we started at this old model that we had, this one-stop shop, what started to happen is that these drivers are approaching us and say, can you do bumper stickers for us? Mm-hmm. We want to be able to identify it while we're working. We want to see other drivers that are from the StopClub family. Said, wow, we should do bumper stickers. We're still doing it, and it's like every time the guy approaches us, and I said, "Oh, what do I have to do to get my stickers?" Yeah, it's funny. We put them inside and outside. Inside is to let the passenger know that there's surveillance in the car. Yeah, and outside just for show.
Yeah. Well, so let me, I asked you why this has worked so well in Brazil and not in the US. And I don't know, maybe that's something we'll figure out by the end of this call. But because I think what you're describing makes a lot of sense. And I feel like I've talked to a lot of people that have tried to launch similar apps or similar features, and nothing has quite caught on in the United States. So I'm really curious to dig into why has this worked so well in Brazil. So, you mentioned 100,000 users. Like, how have you gotten to 100,000? Where did those users come from? Was it all, what are basically your acquisition sources, or however much you want to share there?
Okay, so what happened here when we launched 6 months ago is that previously we have approached a few.
Oh yeah, and I guess so. Was it? Yeah, when did you kind of start? Get most of that growth too? Was it 6 months ago or?
Yeah, 6 months ago is when we launched actually, and we started really fast, really fast. We have been growing like 60% month over month.
So 100,000 users in 6 months. That's pretty impressive. And they're all free. This is a free app download, right?
It's a free app. No charges, and no small lines on the contract. So what happened is that we approached a few gig influencers like yourself from Brazil, and we talked to them and said, well, this is what we're building. Do you want to contribute in some way? And they all said, okay, so what are you doing? How are you doing it? And we started to develop this new solution because this all started after the pandemic, right? When the pandemic hit us hard, that's when we decided to close all the physical spaces and become a full digital solution.
Got
and we approached these guys and said, oh, this is what we've been working on. We want to create this app that connects all the gig community. What's your take on it? Please criticize this as hard as you can.
Yeah.
And they started to give us some directions, some tips, and we're perfecting the app. When we decided to launch, we called these guys again and said, so it's ready to launch. Can you help us out? So of course. So all of them started to talk about us in their channels. And then it happened a cool thing. We have like this little sort of clubhouse inside our app as well. So you create audio rooms and you can chat with a bunch of friends at the same time, not only like via walkie-talkie. So these gig workers, these influencers, they started to do these live sessions at YouTube or Instagram, whatever. And then they say, so we're going to continue this conversation on the StopClub app. Please search my group there, and we continue there.
That's cool. Okay. So it's sort of like they would be on their YouTube channels discussing something. And sometimes people say, oh, leave a comment below or go to my private Discord channel. And in this case, it was saying, hey, go to my StopClub. Do they have a channel or an app or what was that?
Inside StopClub, they have these channels.
Got it.
And they have these audio rooms, what we call groups. They create groups, and inside the groups, they create audio rooms.
Okay. And I guess... Oh, what were you saying? Go for it.
No, sorry.
Well, yeah, I think that was one of the reasons. I think Fernando, who had a channel on YouTube, reached out. And I remember the first line, he said, I've got a channel on YouTube. I'm driving in Brazil. I've got 350,000 subscribers. I say, what? 350,000 subscribers? That's a shitload. I'm here in the US with probably the biggest rideshare channel and gig economy and just over 100. And so it's sort of interesting to me. I'm like, it obviously, I realized it, but it started making me think like, wow, there's probably like, it sounds like there's actually like several rideshare guys in Brazil that are, maybe 3 to 5 times the size of my channel. And so it's interesting too. You mentioned earlier, right, that there's like 22 million gig workers in Brazil. So it seems like there's a lot of, almost like a lot more interest too, right? Like I think that there's sort of, there might be a number of gig workers in the US, but I think if they're not like actively seeking that information and that community and there's that buzz and that excitement, right, it may not, like in the US, like there's a reason why there aren't, 4 or 5 YouTubers with 300, 400,000 subscribers. Like there isn't that same level of buzz and excitement. And for whatever reason in Brazil, it seems like there clearly is that because you got 3, 4, 5 YouTubers maybe that have pretty big followings. And so I could definitely see you getting to, like, I feel like it would be tough to get this app to 100,000 subscribers reaching out to YouTubers in the US. But I think because of the dynamics in Brazil, it sounds like that was, more doable. And, also you guys did something pretty smart that I don't know if you realize this or not, but a lot of people come to me after the fact and say, hey, look at my app or look at my book. Do you want to help me with it? Do you want to promote it? And I'm like, who the hell is this guy? Why should I care about this person? Right. But what you did, you went to them when you're in development, right? So now they feel like they're a part of the process, right? And so when this app comes out, whether they have any financial incentives or not, it's like, oh, I gave this guy, Luis feedback, and now I'm seeing it in the app. And so I feel like a little bit of ownership. So I'm a lot more likely to promote it, talk about it, get the word out, right?
Exactly. And they really created this like sort of symbiotic relationship, because the interesting that happened is that, like, for instance, when you publish a video on YouTube, your only way of interaction with your audience is on the comments section, right? Okay, so on StopClub, they started to develop this way more friendly interaction in live and vividly. And they can present their questions, and they really, this guy that has a lot of followers, like as you said, Fernando is kind of a big deal here in Brazil. And when you'll be able to talk to this guy, so you're like, wow, I can really chat with him, and he would answer my questions. So as I said, it began to develop a symbiotic relationship with these influencers, because the more they use the app to talk to their audiences, more followers they get. And the engagement of their channels gone up a lot.
Yeah.
So they wanted to use the app more to gain more followers and to raise the engagement of the channel. So it worked really well for both of us.
Yeah, no, it's pretty cool. I'm on Fernando's YouTube channel right now. He's up to 300. So since he's emailed me, he's up to 373,000 subscribers right now. Video he posted 2 days ago has 50,000 views. So he's definitely doing pretty well. And I imagine he's probably a pretty big, rock star in the rideshare world down,
what happened?
In Brazil.
Fernando is from the south part of Brazil, right? And we were working in São Paulo. We created this event to host and talk about StopClub with other influencers that are just starting their channels. And we were having coffee at a restaurant, but Fernando had his StopClub app on, and all his followers could see where they are. All his other friends could see where they are. And then this guy just entered the coffee shop and said, "Wow, I was hoping to find you here. Can I buy you a coffee?"
That's pretty cool.
We're like, who are you? I said, I'm friends from Fernando. Fernando has over 10,000 friends in the app. So
yeah, that's pretty cool. So let's start talking about, I think the reason why you reached out to me originally was you guys are looking at expanding to the US. I mean, I guess before we get into the nitty gritty, give me the quick update. So you guys are getting good traction in Brazil. What's the focus of the company right now? Is it, growing more in Brazil, expanding to the US, a little of both? Where are you guys at?
Oh, what happened is that people organically started to work in other countries like US, Canada, Portugal, Argentina. We had our first user in Japan, but he's a Brazilian. But we started to see this movement, and as long as it was happening, we saw not only Brazilian profiles, but we saw also some because we saw the name, right? We can see that there are some Americans that are joining StopClub. So we said, so what's going on? So the main reason why we reached you is that I wanted to know the differences and the similarities of our markets, and to see if our solutions they have a chance to gain traction in the US. Like when you think of it the most simple way, like if you're a gig worker, don't you want to connect with other gig workers? For me, it's logical that there should be some kind of connection there. They shouldn't work alone all this time.
Definitely. Well, I mean, and I think this is definitely a topic, that I've hit on a number of times, right? That in a normal job, right? Like my old job, right? If you sign up, they send you all this information, fill out all these info, everyone just ignores it. No one reads the training. You just go to your coworker right next to you and say, "Hey, how does this work? How do you do that? Where's this?" Right? And you kind of learn through osmosis and chatting with other people. Obviously, you really don't have that in the gig economy. And it's even magnified because a lot of the companies, want to classify drivers as independent contractors around the world. Right, really, and they don't want to pay them as employees. And in the US specifically, right, if you're providing training, that's one of the things that is more like an employee. So they actually literally avoid training because they don't want to get sued, right? And so
no
you
labor
really
relations at all.
Are out on your own. And also, I mean, it's not rocket science being an Uber driver working in the gig economy, but it's a little tougher than it looks, right? I mean, you have to worry about expenses. And in the US, right, where in Brazil, right, if most people are renting their car, you said it's expensive, but your balance sheet, your P&L, right, your profit and your loss every week is pretty simple. Let's say you make, in Brazil, or let's do US dollars, right? Let's say you make $1,000 US, you paid $300 to rent a vehicle, you spent $100 on gas, 1,000 minus 400, you made $600 that week. It's very simple. But when you own your own car, you don't have that weekly fee. So it's really hard to figure out, hey, I bought this car 6 years ago. What depreciation, what maintenance, what estimated taxes am I, how much should I be setting aside, right? So that's pretty confusing. And frankly, there's a lot of argument, over how to figure that out. And it really depends on the assumptions that you're making and a lot of factors. It's like, it sounds, I don't know if it sounds simple, but it is complex. And so I think that's a big difference. But I mean, it was interesting to hear when you're describing all the product and the features that you built and the pain points. I think those are exactly like, I think from a product perspective, everything that you guys have built translates really well to drivers and gig workers in the US. I mean, I think, like I said, maybe some things, there's some small differences, but, all of those, feelings of loneliness and you're not having that interaction. I mean, that I would say is 100% the same. And, we've seen these little examples, right? I think we literally have an article on my site that's like the top 6 or 7 ways to contact other drivers. And I believe like 6 or 7 is Voxer groups, right? There's like these Voxer groups. They were very popular when I first started driving 8 or 9 years ago, but I think they've sort of lost some of that popularity. Now there's a lot of Facebook groups that drivers go into, but I mean, Facebook is like a terrible, UI for the type of, everything that you guys are trying to build. You really, on Facebook groups, it's a lot more information, right? And less community and less, sort of social interaction and things like that. So I think
from our advantage here is that we are a product designed for gig workers.
Yeah.
And with the help of gig workers.
Yeah.
So that's the whole point.
Right.
And we really have this really strong purpose of connecting this community and make them work better by relying on each other.
Yeah.
And we don't think that we have all the solutions, but we have the platform to assist them to communicate better, to locate their friends better, and work better together.
Yeah. So, and I mean, I think in thinking about the challenge in approaching the US market, you've got a couple hundred drivers signed up in the US. To get to 100,000 is obviously, 200 versus 100,000 is a pretty big difference. And so I think the real challenge, though, is actually on the acquisition side, right? And we work with a lot of companies that are looking to acquire drivers or sign drivers up, even for free apps, frankly. And the two big things is one, it's hard to reach them. I mean, literally, like, how do you reach them at a cost-effective price point? And then number two, there's a lot of churn, right? So you might pay $5 to $10 to get someone to download a free app in the United States, on Facebook ads or whatever. But if they only stick with the gig for 3 months or 6 months, and you have a product that doesn't really serve them beyond the gig economy, that's an expensive, customer, right? Because they don't stick around for very long. And it seems like you guys have sort of figured out this little growth hack with the influencers and involving them. And, maybe they, you can incentivize them on the back end, or they're just kind of promoting it, on their own because they think it's a great app. But I imagine that similar approach would be tough in the Uber and Lyft space because there really aren't, 4 or 5 Fernandos, to be honest, in the in the US space. But one thing that is interesting that might be useful for you is in the delivery space. We are seeing a number of YouTube influencers, especially around DoorDash. There's probably 7 to 10 DoorDash channels that are really popular that, some are, up there, maybe not 300,000 subscribers, but, they've got 10, 20, 50, 100K. But what I'm seeing is actually that the communities that they're fostering, right? I mean, you'll have channels with 20,000 subscribers. They release a video, 25,000 views, right? I mean, like when our videos, like average, we might get, 2 to 5,000 views. We've had a few that have done well, get 10,000, 15, 50,000 in the past couple of weeks, right? But we've got 100 and whatever, 15,000 subscribers, right? And so when you see channels with very low subscribers relatively that are kind of really able to outkick the coverage, what that tells me is that there's a really big community out there in the DoorDash side of things looking for information. And, I've seen some of these guys actually say like, hey, hop over to my Discord channel to chat more and to sort of get some of the things that you're looking for. So I think that would be, there's a few Uber and Lyft folks that, I'm happy to send you a list of some of these guys that I think would be a good starting point. But I think, DoorDash and some of these, really DoorDash would probably be a good starting point when it comes to the YouTube influencers, because I think that is kind of like the most mutually beneficial arrangement where it's like, hey, if I'm sending people to the StopClub app, what am I sort of getting in return as an influencer? It's great that, I'm providing a great resource to my community, but I can only promote it so much, right? If there's no benefit in return that I'm getting, right? But I like that aspect that what I'm getting in return is that my community, I'm, building up a community and, there's sort of that, symbiosis, right? They might come back to my videos or develop, a following over on this channel, right? That kind of works in, like a cool way that you showed, like, let's say I want to have an event in Los Angeles and it's like, boom, all of my followers can now see where I am and come find me, for example.
Exactly. And all these other YouTubers, they started to cross subscribers.
Mm.
So they started to like get subscribers from other YouTubers, and so they all of them raised the number of subscribers in this partnership. So was really good. But I think that the thing that we want right now in the US market is to get some people to test it.
Mm-hmm.
So are these like small but with possible to become like this atomic communities that can grow? So how are you guys, what's your opinion on it? So you've been using StopClub for like a month with your friends. You have 10 friends using StopClub. What's your take on it? What should we work on harder? What do you expect? Because one of the things that we get a lot is exactly what you're saying, to have this feature to compute gains and losses. So so it can like not like a spreadsheet, right?
Yeah.
But a place where you can put everything that you win, all the platforms that you work, all your gains and your losses, or the money that you're saving for something else. And that's something that we're working on here.
Yeah. Well, we've had a company on the podcast before called Argyle, and basically what they are sort of kind of like a plaid for the gig economy, right? So you can actually use their technology to log in to, so let's say StopClub integrated with Argyle. Now, if I'm a user of StopClub, I can log into all of my actual Uber driver profiles, Lyft, 99, whatever, all the companies that I work for, and they can basically use an API pull and grab all the information that you're working for, this platform and how much you're earning and across, and you can really kind of, and so a lot of the apps for drivers in the United States, I mean, this is kind of going to be like table stakes in the next year or two. All of these apps that are basically trying to help drivers earn more, provide them more information, Gridwise, Solo, a lot of these apps are all integrating this Argyle data so that they can provide those types of features to drivers going forward. So I think that's definitely valuable, and that unlocks a whole host of cool leaderboard features and competitions, and sort of I'm earning this much on Instacart, and here's how much I could be earning on Uber based off of actual hundreds of thousands of data points, right? So that's I think that's kind of all coming for sure. I mean, is there any one or two features or anything that you think you're looking to add, or is it more about you feel pretty good about the product now and you kind of just want to grow and figure out ways to get it into new markets, grow, sort of horizontally into new markets, and vertically, in Brazil?
This feature is one that we've been working on for quite a while, is to have this financial management inside the app. But our next release is actually what we're calling here, like translating from Portuguese, it's called live. So you have this live feature. So you can, when you're recording with your secret camera, right, at the app, but you can now stream to your friends what's happening. Cool. So you can stream with both cameras. So you can show what's going on outside your car. Like, oh, look at this huge traffic that I'm facing. What's going on there? And you can, all your friends can see what's going on. They can like find your profile. Your profile will be blinking, and they can see that you're live.
Sort of like the Twitch streaming, right, for gamers, how a lot of that started. So few quick questions on that. I mean, first of all, doesn't using your phone as a dash cam, and especially streaming, doesn't it use a lot of battery, a lot of data, things like that?
Sure. I don't know how in the US works for the drivers, but here in Brazil, they always have the phone with the charger cable.
Okay.
Always. So
just keep your phone charged in at all times and should be fine.
Yeah. And regarding data, it's here in Brazil is becoming really almost inexpensive. I think that in the US is pretty much like that. And the thing is that
most drivers in Brazil are on a pay-as-you-go data type plan.
They're not really prepaid or something like that. They pay later.
Got it. Okay. So whatever they use, they pay for basically. But it is sort of like if you use 2 gigabytes of data versus 5 gigabytes, it's obviously more expensive the more data you use.
Actually, nowadays they have these plans of like have data plans that look really huge for their work. But what happens after you exceed your limits? You don't pay more. They just slow you down.
Gotcha. Okay.
But I was curious about asking you something. Do you think that most Uber drivers and gig workers in general in the US, they use more Android phones or iPhones?
Yeah, so I believe I can double check. I think we've done a couple surveys around this and we can sort of look at our analytics, but I actually think Android, like normally if you look at like US, there's like a pretty good amount of iPhone users, versus Android compared to the rest of the world where it's like overwhelmingly Android. But I think with gig workers, it's kind of majority Android versus
really?
iPhone. Yeah, just because they're cheap, the Androids are obviously cheaper and, frankly, like gig workers don't make a ton of money to be able to afford an $800-900 iPhone. So, some of the kind of dynamics between like if you looked at like customer Uber, it'd be like a lot of iPhones, right? But actually with drivers, I want to say like off the top of my, I think we have a good survey question or actual data I can send you about it, but I believe it's like 60%, 50 to 60% for sure are on Android would be my guess off the top of my head.
That's kind of funny because here in Brazil, it's like 98% Android, right?
Right.
But when we talk to these users in the US, these Brazilian users, so Brazilian immigrants working as a gig worker in the US, when we talk to them, most of them said that they're using iPhones. And one thing that actually struck me really by surprise is that most of them said, we don't want to be connected to a community here. We are here to work, to gain as max as money as you can and send some money back home and like work hard. And I don't want to know where, I don't want for other people to know where I am working, because otherwise they will come to work as where I am. And I was saying, man, there's not like scarcity of rides in the US.
Yeah.
All the news say that Uber like needs drivers badly. And I don't know what's your take on it. I'd love to hear.
Well, I think there's definitely an interesting dynamic where, drivers, I think like probably rightfully so, are very selfish, right? Like drivers want as few drivers out on the road as possible. Drivers want, as much surge pricing as possible in the moment, right? Because then I make more, right? I want as long a rides as possible because then I make more. Now, obviously you can imagine, right? If every ride is 5x surge, over time, customers are gonna be like, screw this service, it's way too expensive, right? But in the moment, I think drivers are rightfully so very selfish, right? And they kind of want what's best for themselves. And so I think that's kind of definitely a dynamic that we see with, not every driver, but some drivers, is that they may not want to share all of their secrets. One of our top contributors actually on the RideShare Guy blog, Sergio, I remember I was initially trying to convince him to come on as a writer for us. And he was thinking like, oh, I don't want to tell everyone my secrets and where I drive and how I drive. And now he shares everything, now he's very open, and I'm very appreciative of all the coverage that he does for us. Right. And so I think that, it's not every driver, but it's definitely some drivers, I think, sort of don't want to share that side. But I think what they all, do have in common is sort of that longing for companionship, right? That longing for someone to talk to,
Exactly.
Right? Maybe it's less about like when and where to drive, right? And I think that's where, when you think about all these things that drivers want, it's when you're building a product for them, it's sort of about finding like what is the areas that like every driver cares about, right? Like we see this a lot with like the employee versus independent contractor, right? Like employees want healthcare and they want benefits and stuff like that, right? But independent contract, drivers who want to be independent contractors, they don't care about any of that stuff. But you can imagine if you're driving 50 hours a week and you don't have healthcare, that's like a huge deal. Like you really, really want that. And it's like a deal breaker versus this other driver who has it. They could give a shit about it, right? But what do those two drivers care about? They both care about, the per mile rate that they're earning. They both care about, not being unfairly deactivated. They both care the customer service, when they call into Uber, that they get someone knowledgeable and, in a short amount of time, right? So it's about finding like those features that as many drivers as possible have as much overlap and kind of care the most about. And I think that there are a lot of opportunities, sort of in the product that you guys have built around the community, Sort of maybe less around like sharing tips and tricks. Because I think that like, honestly, like I'd say half of drivers just go out there and just drive to drive, right? Like they take whatever Uber gives them. They're not too concerned with like, going on YouTube and figuring out like what's the latest news and strategy and coming to my blog and how do I make more? Or should I try out a new service? It's like, I flip the Uber app on. I stay busy. I make some money. I can cash out whenever I want. They send me next trips before I even finish my current trip when it's busy. Like, why would I need to sign up for another app? And, when things go wrong, they usually reach out to me. It's like, oh, I was unfairly deactivated or,
Exactly.
like, I don't know, something happened, right? But then it's, I got into an accident, right? Then it might be a little bit too late. But I think there are, those types of drivers do care. It's like, you might get lonely. Like you mentioned something at the beginning. You said, hey, drivers might be out there 10, 12, 14 hours a day. And if you don't talk to anyone other than your passengers during that time, it can definitely get lonely. You might want to take a coffee break, right? Like I imagine that there's some of those types of connections that would be very compelling. I think the challenge getting into the US market is figuring out a way to do it, at a cost-effective acquisition point.
Yeah, right now here in this, you said it was really interesting. There's a different culture here. We see a lot of times like drivers just sharing their location and say, man, there's a party going on in X neighborhood and you should come by. There are a lot of good rides here.
Yeah.
And I'm on my third passenger this night. Come on. Or like when I first started to watch these YouTube channels, I noticed some really like no-brainer tips, but for me it was like, oh, of course. So it's like noon and you have no passenger. Like be next to a hotel because that's the time of checkout, and there's good rides for the airport. And I said, oh, that's pretty obvious. How I never thought about that. And I really noticed that they like to share tips here in Brazil.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. I feel like that does happen here in the Facebook groups and the forums. And so, like I said, I think some drivers are actively seeking those tips and that information and, willing to share.
Strategy.
But strategy. I mean, now that I think about it, I mean, that's what, if you go through these Facebook groups and forums, right, there's definitely a lot of that because, like I always say, right, I mean, this job isn't rocket science, but there is a learning curve, right? And you don't have anyone to talk to, right? And, we see it actually in the data that after 500 to 1,000 trips, drivers actually earn $5 an hour more after 1,000 trips, right? Because they've figured out like, oh, this is when it's busy. Avoid this area, go here.
Makes all the difference.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to like quadruple your earnings, but you can definitely have a nice little bump. So I think we see that for sure. And but that might be actually an interesting cultural difference. Maybe Brazilians are a little more likely to kind of like engage in that type. And, so that might be a feature that, I don't need to build differently here in the US, but I might emphasize less of that collaborative nature of the app for the US market and more of the, hey, need a friend, like see where your friends are at, like find other people to talk to, kind of more of that collegial atmosphere. So that might be interesting for sure.
A cool thing that happened here, and it's really interesting, is that drivers using it with their families. So we have this like wives that are worried about their husband. They're like, it's late at night. Let me just check if he's coming back home or if is everything okay. Whoa, what is he doing in this neighborhood? He never works there. What's going on? So this is a cool thing that happened. Like we saw like children following their parents. On
cool.
StopClub app. That's cool.
Nice. Very cool. Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing everything about StopClub. I know we've given the audience a lot to think about. So if you have any questions for me, I'll let you ask them off air, but I think we covered a lot of ground. I'm really interested to see how you guys progress, not only in the Brazilian market, but obviously in the United States, because I think this is definitely an app that and a suite of services you guys have developed that I would love to see, hundreds of thousands of drivers in the United States using. I think you and I will have to brainstorm a little bit and figure out how to, get them using it in an effective manner. So really appreciate you coming on, Luis. If folks want to learn more about the app, more about yourself, where can they go? Where can they find more info about StopClub?
Yeah, we have it on Google Play and App Store. The iPhone version, of course, is limited to the iOS limitations, but we do have both versions in English. So please download. And give us a feedback.
Cool. So I guess if I'm a driver in the United States, I can go to stopclub.com and download the app today, right?
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
We have
cool.
the
Well,
English version and the Portuguese version for immigrants as well. We have the Spanish version coming up.
very cool. Very cool. All right. Appreciate it, Luis.
Thank you very much for your time, man. It was a pleasure to be here.